Take me back to 1997. What did starting the brand look like for you?
Starting the brand looked like a move to Hong Kong, where I was leaving a career at American Express and Ogilvy Advertising and moving to Hong Kong without a job, but with my husband, and feeling like this was a time, if I was going to ever do anything on my own, that this would be my moment to do it. I think I was like 28 or 29, something like that. And I just took stock of what my strengths were, which were marketing and definitely, getting a business acumen from working at American Express, and then combining it with art skills. I was an art minor in college and grew up with a father who's an artist and always taking art classes. So I wanted to combine something to do something that was very entrepreneurial and combined art and business, financial, and advertising. And I was in Hong Kong, and starting a clothing line absolutely seemed to check off all those boxes. And it was just coupled with the fact that I absolutely loved clothing and was obsessed with it. And it seemed like a logical thing to do in 1997 in Hong Kong, which it was. It was a good place to start a company for sure.
Now I know, with my limited knowledge of the fashion world, that Europe can be very fashion forward compared to America. At least I think that's true. Is the same for Hong Kong? Do you feel like that is a very fashion forward area?
It was not in 1997, and it definitely is now. It was not to the degree that you actually wondered how in the world could we sell products. So it was easy to make things there, and it was a very closed loop market. So even though it was a huge city, you only had a few publications, so you actually could market yourself. But back then, you had only, it was like Gucci was in the market, and then a brand called G2000, which is America's lower end version of the Gap. And you really had nothing in between that luxury and that very entry level. And so Hong Kongers didn't really have, you were either a tie, a big socialite, and you were all luxury, or you were kind of relegated to wearing this lower end stuff. There was nothing in the middle.
Okay. And so you said you had some good business acumen from your time at American Express, and you worked at Ogilvy for marketing. What did you do there?
So at Ogilvy, I was actually on the American Express account. They were my client. And then after 3 years, they hired me. So at Ogilvy, I was on the account side, always wanting to be on the creative side. But I was on the account side. And then American Express hired me to do marketing. And I ended up moving into a sales program that they did, signing on large new industries to take American Express. And that's where I became very interested in and experienced with what entrepreneurs did. Like, for example, one of my accounts was this guy, Scott Beck, who had just started Boston Market at the time. And so being able to go out to Denver and meet with him and, walk through his P&L and understand how he approached growing his business and building a break even analysis for him on accepting the card and discount fee structure, all of that really helped me get very comfortable with numbers, which is very important in this industry. It's very creative, but it's also very much a business at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And so you moved to Hong Kong, started the brand. What did the early, first 5 years look like? Did you stay in Hong Kong, or did you end up moving?
I moved back to the US in mid 2000, and it was, I was pregnant at the time. And the year before, I had traveled to the US 11 times. And, there were 18-hour flights there and back. So I was, spending close to 40 hours, almost a month on a plane. And I just, we needed to be in the US. That's where the market was. And so what it looked like was, from the very beginning, I had a partner, but a woman that I met in Hong Kong. And I started the company on my own after 3 days of living there. And I'm it really did happen that fast. It happened so fast that John Stossel from 2020 at the time came out and interviewed me because he was doing a story about which places around the world are most conducive for entrepreneurs to start up a business. And when he went out there, he actually showed that by the time he left, I think, Kai Tak Airport and got to my office, he had actually started a baseball company and had hats that he was ready to sell. So it was very, very conducive to setting up a business, and so conducive that when I met a woman a few days into living in Hong Kong and realized that we had mutual acquaintances in Georgia, that she ended up coming with me to my factory that I had found within 24 hours of landing in Hong Kong. And all of this without e-commerce or, an internet search. But we found these guys named Benny and Ivan, who were two very young Chinese men whose parents had been in the industry for a very long time. And they knew that they wanted to do something in the industry, but that there had to be a way to do it that wasn't making pennies on the dollar. And all of a sudden, they got this fax from this American who was interested in creating a clothing line that was in this middle price point. And it gave them a lot of visibility to what the future could look like, that it didn't need to be selling to Walmart or Gap. Maybe you can make a product and make good money from it, and then everyone along that chain can, have a sustainable business. So Benny and Ivan were very trusting guys who I connected with, and they were my production company that I started out with, my factory. And I went down to Indonesia to do my fabrics when I first started out, because I was very interested in the prints that batik and ikat fabrics, it was just very interesting to me. So we just did things. I remember calling the Indonesian consulate and we got a list of 100 print suppliers, and we flew to Jakarta and had like 30 appointments set up with these print suppliers, and not one appointment showed up for the appointments until the very end of the day. And a woman came in and she was wearing a burqa, and her husband, her name was Freri, and she was like, "Are you Amy and Octavia?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, we're with Zen Fabrics. And I said, "This is great to meet you, but we had like 29 other appointments who didn't show. Like, what, is this like an Indonesian thing or what's happening?" And she said, "Well, they were looking for two Chinese men because the fax came from Hong Kong. They didn't know if Amy and Octavia were male Chinese chosen names, and they didn't expect a 29-year-old and a 23-year-old wearing, Lacoste shirts and shorts and sneakers sitting in the lobby of a hotel. They assumed that we were like these big businessmen from China." But this family, we ended up checking out of our hotel, and they let us stay in a guest house that they had in Solo, Indonesia. And we stayed there for a week and ate at the local Pizza Inn, which I would have been fine eating anywhere, but Octavia had all these like restrictions, so fine. But it was pineapple pizza every night and Van Damme movies when you were like trying to watch TV. And we made our fabrics there and sent them back to Hong Kong and created our first collection, which was 4 styles. And we spent a total of $30,000 on that first collection. I put in 15, Octavia put in 15. And we literally went around Hong Kong and picked up people like 2 like desperate college guys. Like, we would go to bars and pick up women. We were like, "You look like a size 6." And we invited them to a party, and we sold them clothing. And I remember our first event, we sold $10,000 worth. And we made back, 20-30% of our investment. And we were able to take that and reinvest it. And so we kept reinvesting and reinvesting. And finally, I was like, this is looking good. We wrote some marketing letters and did up a beautiful brochure, which at the time was not done. But I was in marketing, and that just seemed logical to me that, like, why wouldn't you do a beautiful, like, colored brochure? And we're in Hong Kong. It was easy to print and do. And we sent it out to all these magazines. And so they thought that we were much bigger than we were. And we got appointments in the US, and we flew to the US with a suitcase full of clothing. I actually thought you brought the clothing and sold it there at the stores, which when I landed in customs, they were like, no, that's not how it works. And I had to pay a fine coming through customs in Vancouver, but that was okay. But we sold our clothing. We started in Boston and met with stores along the way, and one of them being Neiman Marcus. And we picked up 13 stores to carry the line. And I remember this tiny store in Athens, Georgia, wrote an order for $6,000. And I was like out of my mind, excited. And then we kept, reinvesting and reinvesting what we had done. And then finally we got Neiman Marcus. They did a big return. Octavia, my partner, she was like, I'm out of here. She moved back to the US. I kept the company. I kept the name, which was named after her grandmother. And it was all amicable. Her sister came to work with us for a long time. And we started, we did the trade shows. The big show was the Coterie. And I got into the Coterie, and that was a big deal. And I had done these scarf skirts that had these prints from different cities on them. They were really kind of like so tacky, they were cool. And it kind of hit at the same time that Matthew Williamson in London had just started out, and he was doing these scarf skirts. And all of a sudden it really just blew up. And then Bill Cunningham did an entire full page of all pictures of my scarf skirt. He didn't realize it was one designer. He was like, oh, it's this printed scarf skirt trend. And it was all my skirt. And so that was kind of like, the proverbial tipping moment, but it's kind of more like a bouncing clown though, like you tip and then you come back, and like, I never really tipped into the good zone completely. Like I always did something to fuck it up a little bit, but it's how you learn, and I learned.
That was going to be a question that I had, and that's an incredible journey in the early days that you laid out. And the question I was going to ask is, as you were going through and reinvesting into your business and producing new clothes and new fabrics, did you have any learning experiences or any obstacles that you faced? Maybe it's confidence in increasing your quantities of orders, or issues with production or things like that.
Well, the one thing that I had really easy that I didn't know what I had on my hands at the time was I had unbelievable production facilities. Not having been in this industry, I had no idea that America's production in the fashion industry was all separated by task. You go to one place to pick up the buttons, another place sews on the buttons, another place cuts the material, another place stitches it together. Like when you would see people going around the garment district with like racks of clothing, they were bringing it from like building to building. So it was a very flat organization. And I didn't know that the difference was in Hong Kong, it's a very vertical organization. So at our factory, on the ground floor, they cut the fabric. The next floor is ironed out. The next floor, it's sewn together. And then like the top floor, it's packaged up and out the door. So it's all in one place. So I never, what would take a young designer to start in New York to be able to manage that kind of fragmented process flow easily, like 10 people, where for me, I'm like, Benny and Ivan, I'll take 300 of these shirts, please, and then they put it into their like vertical. So the setup was totally different there. So I didn't know, if I'd known then what I know now, like, to be honest, like I'd probably be like a gabillionaire, because at that time, that's when Theory and all these other brands had started up in the middle price market in the US, but they were all producing in the US, not in Asia. So I was able to be this kind of one-man show for a long time. And then I produced, and when my first shipments, I sent home to my mom. Now, the other thing that I didn't know that I wish to hell I had known, because billionaire thing aside, is that I didn't hire a technical designer. And so I was always fitting things on my own body. I thought I thought there was a universal concept of what fit and what didn't, like really stupid stuff. And I remember I shipped out like 200, 300 of these dresses that the stores started calling me, and they're like, they have cone boobs, and they're like not in a, like a Gautier Madonna way. Like these are ill-fitting cone boob dresses. And I remember it was like, $20,000 worth of dresses. And I just remember sitting in my chair in Hong Kong, just crying. And my husband was like, you just need to decide, like, are you going to fold on this? Or are you just going to like look back on this one day as just like a little blip in the road? And if you want to look on it as a blip in the road, you're going to take all the dresses back and you're going to find something to do with them. You're going to find people with very pointed boobs to sell them to. But you've got to like really do right by the customer, because your business is going to end right here if you don't. And I'm so glad that he was just very pragmatic in that way. And I think, this was my own money that I had invested. And so, of course, that money, you're constantly looking at money in proportion to what you've spent rather than future opportunity. And that was hard to swallow, and I wish I had learned my lesson from there, but I didn't even know what a technical designer was, that was like a role that would have really helped me in the future. And it took me like a good 3 or 4 years to hire one of those people, who's Jasmine, who is still with us to this day. And the tech team is one of our most critical teams in the company.
But all in all, it sounds like it was things you learned along the way, and it doesn't sound like you would have taken. You wish you would have taken the other path. Glad you continued forward with it.
Yeah, I definitely, yes, I don't wish that I had taken the other path. I also think that, mistakes are only as devastating as what your expectations were measured against them. So, like, okay, it can be a mistake if I only made $10,000 in a year, but it's only incredibly upsetting if I was really hoping for $1 million. And so there's like setting your expectations and measuring mistakes against that, so you can like really decide how detrimental are the mistakes. And then there's, mistakes that cause you to lose money and not be able to fund your business, and can really compromise what you're doing, even trying to just do that day.
For sure. And let's shift gears a little bit and talk about from the early days and as you progress forward what your marketing looked like. Were you, may word this weird, but were you like a founder led personal brand company from early on, or did you focus on the brand name and getting yourself out there in major retail stores and established locations?
So when we came up with the name Tibi, it was very much like I had a business marketing mindset where I thought this might just be one of many brands that I'll have in my lifetime. And I never, ever wanted it associated with my name, ever. Like, it's just not, it's not who I am, but it's also because I was not a trained designer either. So, I always approached design more from a little bit of a marketing merchandising hat, I guess, rather than a true design hat. I looked at it as telling a visual story rather than, when you speak to our designer, Tracy, she can just get like so wound up about the curve of a seam and what it means and everything, and um, so I was never that kind of a designer. And so when we were selling the clothing, I think I was talking about it probably more from a pragmatic way, that at the time I get why I was approaching it that way. It was kind of like, yeah, probably the way D2C brands talk today, right? Like, the Everlane story, like, you know, I will hit my head falling asleep hearing those kinds of stories now. There's no like soul in them. And at the time, of course, like it was hard to put a soul into it because it was just such a marketing story. And I think for me, our big turning point as a company really came with COVID and really kind of reflecting on the fact that we had been around for so long. We had kind of survived for a while, and that was absolutely meaningful and meant something, and that I should be really proud of that. And that maybe my style point of view is relevant and important, and I can lean into that more and really start using my sketches in a way that is more outward facing rather than just internally between me and my head of design. And so it wasn't until COVID that the line became that if you know about Tibi now, there's a strong chance that you know about me. 3 or 4 years ago, you would know Tibi, but you would have no idea at all if there were any faces behind it. And hopefully you don't just know that it's me. Hopefully you actually know about Tracy and Sarah and Katura and the whole gang. But it's a team of creatives, and it's a team of humans, of real people.
Well, and let's unpack that concept of putting soul into it. I know you said when it's just the marketing message, there wasn't as much soul into it. And, that's something you can commonly see today. As you started to make that shift during COVID and you started to put yourself out there more, what types of actions or what types of reactions did you see from that? Like, were you able to start building community or more personal brand off of that? Like, how did it affect you and how did it affect the business?
I mean, it had a really good effect on the business. And I think, when I talk about soul, it was soul in terms of creativity in my design, but it was also really becoming very clear about what my husband and I wanted out of our life for our family and for our employees. And I think when I say that it was soulless before, it was a fun marketing challenge to throw up $150 million goal onto the wall and be like, let's go for it. And we'll be at 300 million in another 5 years. And when you do that, all the decisions that you're making are against this business goal, right? And when COVID hit, that's when we were like, why is 150 on the wall? Like, that's going to destroy our lives. It's going to make us like take on investors. We're going to start reporting to other people. We'll never really be able to have creative integrity and all these things we started writing down. Like, what is important to us? What do we need? When I was saying I could have been a billionaire in 97, well, I know a lot of billionaires. I wouldn't trade my life with them for anything in the world. And I don't need a private jet. I don't crave these things in my life. I crave calmness. I crave being around people that I really like. I crave having customers who inspire me and who I want to have conversations with. And so coming to that realization that 150 is way off the table. That is out of bounds. We don't need it. We're going for less than half that, like not necessary. And so then it allowed me to really be very honest in my approach. Like I didn't have to, nothing was, there was no reason to get someone to try and buy 200 pieces of something when if they bought 20, it would actually just be really good, And so I think settling down and speaking from a very honest place, people who have their radar out, they can sense that. And other people can't, and that's fine, and that's their thing. But other people who are honest and genuine and care, like you see it, you know it when you see it. And so we ended up just by having conversations online, attracting the kind of people that we wanted to attract. And even in the chaos of 2020, we were not attracting crazies, or we were not, let me say, we weren't attracting people who were very righteous in their points of view and had no desire for any kind of honest discourse. we seem to be attracting people who, even if they wrote me a question that at that time could have been inflamed if it was in a tweet, when they wrote it to me in a DM and you had a conversation back and forth, it became like this place for people to just realize that there is normalcy in the world, at least for what we value as normal, which is conversation and discourse and curiosity, and just a real appreciation of creativity and people working and working hard and being honest about the expectations that you have to work hard. Wait, sorry, are you on mute or?
Myself when you talk, so
Oh, sorry.
I'll edit that out. But I love that when you were putting out content and you were starting to get yourself out there, what mediums or what channels were you doing it on? And when you when you hear people talk about building a personal brand and putting themselves out there, it's always tactical with having a specific strategy of execution. Did you go that route, or did you just create content as it came to you and as you felt led to make it?
Well, it's interesting. I just recently did a Substack called Advice from a Multi-Billionaire, and it was one of our multi-billionaire friends. I mean, we live in Greenwich, so you can throw a coffee cup and you'll hit one, right? But um, one of the guys told me, he said, why are you not putting yourself out there? And this was in 2019. And I said, it's just not my thing. I'm an introvert. I'm not really I'm not a designer, and he's like, I know, but he was like, you're the owner of the company, and he was just like, okay. He said, you don't have to put yourself out there. Just lean into what it is that you are then. If you are an introvert, lean into that, play up on that, right? And it doesn't mean like you go all Margiela and be like, I'll never be seen. But he was like, just lean into that. Keep doing what is in your comfort zone and don't go beyond that. But whatever is in your comfort zone, push it and, embrace it. And so when 2020 hit, I really thought about that. And I was like, well, I've always been comfortable talking to people about business, and just from Amex and Ogilvy, I've always been giving presentations and things like that. And I was like, so I can do this. Like I can talk and I can answer questions and I can talk business and creativity. And so I kept it about the things that I really understood, which was business and creativity and all of that. And I did it on Instagram, and I did it through stories. And I remember and we did it through lives. I remember doing my first live was not until COVID. And I can't remember who I did it with. Vanessa Hong, I think. That was the first live. And I was just like, how do I look like my grandmother, like trying to press the right buttons. And so it started on live. And then stories I had been doing pre-COVID, but I didn't have a voice in it yet. There was no, like, if you look at, when I go back and look at my stories from 2019, they're very like all over the place. I just very haphazard. And so I think I started really using stories in 2020 and on to tell a concise story about style and do it from a beginning to middle to end. And TikTok, I didn't go on for a long time. Like maybe TikTok was 2 years ago, maybe. Substack was 2 months ago, maybe. So that's the medium that it's been in. And then writing the book has been a big way for me to be able to communicate with people. And then last year we spent the year traveling around and doing book talks, book clubs. And so, yeah, book, Instagram, TikTok, a little bit, and Substack.
And I normally cap off each episode with 3 rapid fire questions. The first one, I normally ask you to summarize what we've talked about, but I want to kind of angle it a little bit differently. And it'll get us the same answer essentially. But if you were talking to somebody who was an aspiring entrepreneur looking to start a clothing brand, or let's just say a new business, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them to absolutely not get advice from anyone in the industry
Hmm.
at all. There are no good examples in this industry. The fact that like we are like the Coca-Cola of fashion right now because no one lasts for as long as we have. And we have gone through a million different iterations solely by just doing it with our head down and doing our own thing. And I think that this industry, like I would read books on how to set up a company. I would explore who I am so that I can be very forthright in what I create. But there is so much to be had to forging your own path. And it really is going at things from the truest point of naivete and letting it unfold in a way that is pragmatically absolutely right for you at every step of the way is going to lead you to an amazing place. And if you want to be the next like mass contemporary brand in Rick or Andrew Rosen's portfolio, like fine. I wouldn't wish, that's not our game. And I guarantee you, if you're in design school, you're not wishing that you could like sell tons of product on sale at Saks and off Fifth. So if you really are wanting to do something unique, don't ask for a lot of advice. Seek out information from the most random places that you're drawn to.
That's good advice. And for anyone listening that's at the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, so they're in school maybe or changing careers, what marketing role or roles do you think would have the highest demand opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that the real opportunity right now is being part of an organization that has content creation housed in the organization. So, because we do all of our storytelling here and our producing of it, and you are literally sitting here with design and sales, you are in a place where you're living and breathing it. And to be very honest and fast in your marketing right now, you have to have access to the immediacy of things percolating and the ability then to make quick decisions and get it up. And I think that bigger companies are embracing that. And I would want to work for a marketing department in a company that was doing it all in house. But if I wouldn't want to be all bifurcated, I wouldn't want to work just for an ad agency or for a company that worked with ad agencies. I'd want to be in a place where you can really affect every decision immediately in real time. And the thing is, that's the beauty of marketing nowadays. Like when I was at Ogilvy, you spent hours putting together what was called a mechanical. You laid out the ad. It went, like the timeline was so long, but now it's like a story. You post it. If it gets a good response, you lean in. And if it doesn't, it goes away, unless you've said something really vulgar or horrible, like it doesn't last. It goes away. Start again the next day. Keep trying.
No, that's so true. There's a lot of companies that are excelling. Liquid Death Water is a content engine. They're excelling.
Oh my God, my son's obsessed with that company.
Really?
Obsessed.
Yeah, I just saw they just rolled out new product. We won't go on a long tangent on that, but they're cool. I believe Ryan Reynolds with Mint Mobile, as he was growing that, he either purchased a marketing agency or had his own that was a big driver for a lot of their stuff.
Listen, I mean, like this may not be, well, I'm just going to say it because I thought it was brilliant, but like what Kanye did with the Super Bowl commercial, like spending all the money on the commercial and being like, you know what, we don't have a dime left over for production, so this is how we're going to go about it. Like that kind of just pure pragmatism that just, first of all, where you can like do it and think it and act on it. And then, just be able to work in a way that just works for you in that moment of time can really lead to amazing things. We don't need to go anywhere else with Kanye, but I'm just saying I thought that was just really brilliant and pragmatic.
I mean, at the end of the day, He is very good at knowing how to promote himself and his businesses. And I mean, that's being a musician at the end of the day, is being a marketer.
Yep.
So last question for you today. Tell us, where can listeners connect with you or just learn more about you and your business?
At Tibi or Tibi.com. And then at Amy Smilovic is my Instagram. And then once you get into those tunnels, like you'll never leave.
Okay. Well, Amy, I appreciate you coming on today. This was a nice journey to see the timeline going from starting in Hong Kong to expanding globally. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.